Hey, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited that you're here and we're speaking about jobs. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a global executive recruiter. I've done this for about 20 years, and I have placed people for directors and VPs and above, and I have placed people around the world. It's a lot of fun, but right now I really believe it's a challenging marketplace. I think it's come full circle where, initially you had to know someone to get a job. Then we got, thousands of resumes. And now it's, again, because of technology, I believe you actually have to know someone to get a job. So I think everyone's being a little bit screened out. I don't know, how many people are aware of exactly what's going on in the market.
So what does that mean? Because before we find a job description, we sent it in, and then we get an interview. How is it different?
It's a lot different now. Exactly. Everybody knows Monster. They know, all the job boards that are out there, Indeed, et cetera. And now there's zillions of them, right? So you go online, you apply, and those pre-screening questions are actually set up by recruiters, by executive recruiters, by companies, and they will screen you out for anything. It could be the amount of jobs, could be you're too old, it could be your salary's too high, could be you don't have employment in the right field. And for whatever reason, all of those screening questions are set up so that someone like myself or a company will only see, say, 5 or 6 resumes that are exact fits. So your resume today might not ever be getting to a hiring manager. And so, if your only job search strategy is to go online and to apply to jobs, there's no guarantees you will ever get an interview today. It's a very strange marketplace. Technology's really taken it away, and, it's made it a lot easier for someone like myself or a hiring manager, but it's made it much more difficult for the applicants. And people don't realize you really have to be out and know people. If you need to know 25 people that would hire you today, within your industry. And if you don't, you need to start doing that. And that's even for your kids. Your kids go to college. And, people spend a lot of money on college educations and majors. And, if your kid is home applying online and they think they're going to get a job, chances are, if they're a 3.0 and we're asking for 3.5, we're going to get a 3.5 candidate. So it's very, very competitive. It's a lot different than people are expecting right now.
What do you suggest that people do when they're looking for a job besides networking?
Yeah, I think, everyone says networking, but, networking to me, it needs to be very defined and strategic. So, it's not, you go to random events, and basically have a couple drinks and then you leave with 2 business cards. That's not networking. I really believe you have to figure out who you need to know and then where are those people. So you could go to conferences, you could go to trade shows, you could go to conventions within your field, and then you could try to get to speak with the speakers. And the speakers are usually CEOs or, high-level people. It's the same at conferences or conventions. Those are the people that are going to hire you are behind and they're presenting their products. Once again, you're getting away from the technology. You are now a person. So you can bring your resume. You can bring your resume to a conference, to a trade show. You can actually go and speak with, some of the speakers and say that you've targeted their company as a place to work. And you just have to think creatively outside the box is how can you get through to actual people in these companies. LinkedIn is great, except LinkedIn is now blocking people as well. So, before, I used to be able to go out and just email everybody I needed to get in touch with. Well, now you have to be somewhat connected to those people. And, once again, that's another barrier that's put up. So it's very hard to find a position. It's a full-time position to find a position. And, there is a lot of age discrimination out there currently, which didn't used to exist, I don't believe, as much. But
what do you
that's
mean
something I've
by
done.
age discrimination?
I believe that people, it can be over 40. I think definitely over 50. That there are certain companies that feel as though you don't learn as quickly, that perhaps you don't like being managed by people who are younger, or perhaps you're not as up to date on technology, or so sometimes they look at the year of your graduation, and that is one of the mandated fields in technology, and sometimes companies screen by that, or you have 25 years of experience, and they don't want that. They want somebody 5 to 7 years experience with a lot less salary as well. So sometimes somebody who's older, it's not just that they're older, it's older and they're making a lot more money. So that does exist. And, my suggestion there is that people really should be out and having many sources of revenue. Anyone who's relying on just one job and thinks you're going to have that job until, you retire could be misled. I mean, we're all numbers. We're all on a contract today.
That's very
So
different from the past, isn't it?
it truly is. I don't know anybody who, basically has pensions, who's stayed at a company 20 years, who gets to retire and have, full benefits, right? I just don't know people that do that anymore. It's unfortunate. I know you have many things in the fire, which is wonderful, and I think that's the way we all need to operate, is to have a lot of revenue streams, and keep out there, because, if you're just relying on one company, and then when you get laid off or let go, you have to start looking, and you're 52 years old, and you're making a lot of money, and then how, to get into the job market. It's very, very tough.
Wow.
It's a different market, huh? Different than when you and I
so
went to school,
different.
right? I mean, you're so much
Yeah.
younger than me, but yeah, it is a lot different.
Yeah,
And, and
yeah.
what do you feel as though you are definitely much more on the technology side, so, what do you feel as though some of the kids, which should be majoring in today? I mean, I see people that are still majoring in, philosophy and psychology and, history and all and I sit there and it's kind of mind-blowing that, all of the standard majors are still being offered when, artificial intelligence, blockchain, all these wonderful things are out there. So what do you think some of
Yeah.
the majors should be?
Well, I think it's supposed to be more holistic, because even though developers are cool and they're seek out, I think we are beginning to value humanities, because you can develop an AI. However, if it doesn't have the understanding of history, anthropology, humanities, English, um, just race relation, um, then you would have a very biased AI. And I don't think that is great for the people, or humanity in general. So I think more than ever, we need to work with a group of really diverse, professionals who have different backgrounds.
Absolutely. I think providing, diverse slates of candidates in every interview, hiring a diverse slate of talent, all ages, all races, all cultures, having that kind of similar values is essential. And, I think kind of that pursuit of passions and all of that, that's great. But you're right, when it comes down to it, it is, diversity of thought, and also kind of, the super values that connect people. But that's interesting that you say that, because with technology, you're correct in that sometimes it can be, everybody becomes too technical, and then there's none of the other, bottom lines, etc.
Yep.
University, it's going to be interesting how they, I know how they proceed with that, if they decide to, overhaul some of it or continue to go the standard route, and it will be interesting. But it's an interesting marketplace for sure. I enjoy what I do. I have placed people, in Poland, Romania, Spain, all different places. So, it's interesting. Cultures are different. Work ethics are different. Vacations are different. In the U.S., healthcare is an interesting moment in time here. Yeah, hopefully it'll change. I hope a lot. We don't know. But I mean, what has your been experience? I know you've hired a lot of contractors and people, for your teams in general. What have some of your experiences been that possibly, you would think to do over or do differently?
Yeah, so I definitely valued HR a lot better. Um, when you're building your own companies or different startups or helping other startups with their company. So in corporations, I think, we tend to not like HR, but, you know,
Thank you.
yeah, but
It's
you,
true.
but all the people that you work with are, you know, mostly, pretty awesome, right? Except
Right.
for a few, because it's really hard to filter, I think, and you don't really appreciate that until you hire people. They say and tell you that they have a certain skill set, and then you later find out that they actually don't. You can't just let them go, right? Because you have to comply with laws and regulations. Um, so, so I think, in that respect, I think big companies do a really good job filtering. Even though it may not be perfect because it cannot be. So with startups, tend to know people pretty well first and see how they work with other people, and whether they do work. I think that's very important. I think there are certain people that you may hire that they may not be used to working with a woman. And I think it's really annoying when you hire a guy and he asks you, "Oh, how do you know that?" Um, so
Wow.
that's kind of weird, right? So, I tend to like really build that relationship first, see how the person interact in different groups, how they work with other people, whether they remember people's names, how they get along, whether they will deliver. Because I think execution and getting the job done is very important. Some people might say that they would do something, but they never would. Even if they're like small things, and you cannot be unreasonable. So you can't expect that certain things are done the next day. But if something is turned in a reasonable period of time and they actually get it done and they put thought on it, I think that's really important. And I think critical thinking skills is exceptionally important now because if you're working with new technology, there's no precedent, right? So it's really how the person creates something new and what kind of thought process they would kind of go through to create that something.
I love your theory on kind of test driving people too. I think that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense because just because someone knows how to interview and can sell themselves as the best candidate for the fit, doesn't mean that they're the best candidate. You're correct, and I think a lot of people do get surprised when they were just a great interviewer. They had no skill. So, and I understand what you're saying. So, yeah, providing some time in the field, providing some time, come and test drive for a week. Let's see how this works. That does make a better fit. And you can really see how the person, bonds with the other people, how they get to know the tasks at hand. I think what you're saying is excellent. I would hope that, more people could intern and could do things like that. And obviously, that would be the better fit, that you could eventually wean people into the job instead of just cold call hire them. But it doesn't always work that way, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, and
Um,
and I think people's relationship with money plays a big role. So I work with a lot of founders, right? So you want to know if a founder is reasonable in whether they are paying their staff, because it turns to trigger down. So it's a lot about their relationship with money, um, and how reasonable they are in compensating the people who will help them build the company. So for me, it's a little bit different because it's more startups, and startups is really a balance between using money reasonably and not, you know, misabusing the funds, right? Because you have a
Paying
certain
themselves,
amount.
right?
Yeah. So it's a little bit different. But I think, if you have a founder who is really scarce with money, they won't pay. They may not pay for work done, and that may become a liability, right? So, and if you have a founder who's too generous, the conservation of the fund for circulation might be depleted too soon. So you want to make sure that when you're looking for a position, you interview the founders to see what their thoughts and circulation of money is.
How about as far as raising funds? I mean, obviously every project is going to be different and unique, but is there a certain number that you feel more comfortable with, that they would raise and et cetera to over raise or, that kind of thing? Or
I think,
how
I
does
think
that
it,
even work?
yeah, I think raising money, I mean, even for VC firms are, like almost a long process. So I think, I know of a project that had a seed round, and they did a lot of stuff with, the little money that they had. So it really depends on the operation and management of the fund. And it's actually better sometimes to, you know, to to kind of think about what you would use the funds for and whether you need it, and to really focus on the revenue, and the profit that the company could generate. But I think it's always good to have extra money in the bank just for rainy days.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand that, and they just kind of walk into it, and then they end up going bankrupt, right? So I
Yeah.
think that that's the biggest challenge is, as we were saying, even the 50 plus community, a lot of them should be looking at other streams of revenue and even opening a bagel business or opening something on the side because there's no guarantees. So, to have that kind of extra stream somehow, some way, whether that's real estate or stock market or whatever they're doing. I think it's really important. But it's interesting what you're saying, that you really have to interview these people that you would eventually go to work for in a startup and really figure out how they are managing, their funds and their money and what's important to them. Because you're correct, even to go to work for someone like that, it's important to know, whether or not they're going to be very frugal or as you said, misappropriation of funds as well. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting time, an interesting dynamic, that's for sure. Um, so what, as far as, what do you think the biggest challenge is today, as far as overall in the startup community?
Um, I think, I think community and relationships become more important than ever, and I think that's really good. Um, so if I know that someone's looking for a job, I'll certainly have an eye, and look out for that person. So it's still a very tight knit community because when you really think about it, you need like a village to actually help a new company become successful. Um, and I think I mean, I don't like to call startup because, how long are you going to start up? When are you going to make money? Like essentially you're just setting up your company, you become a new company, and then hopefully provide services and products to people, and then you get blessed from those products and services and make some money, right?
That's what you're good at, right? That's why you exist, to help us do that.
So
Push us over there. Revenue generation piece. Enough dreaming, right?
So I have a question for you. For a lot of these
Sure.
AI job placement companies, Like this using AI to help people to find jobs. Do you feel that that's been helpful, or do you think that's been blocking people access?
I see everything both ways right now. And, I'm, in the dating world as well, right? So I've seen the AI for dating. I see, I see it very similar, right? You have to find the exact fit, and you're kind of trusting that this is pulling from past memories and past histories, and providing you with something that is easier. So yes, it's going to provide a certain percentage of people perfect jobs and perfect dates, right? It really will. I mean, we get that. But there are a lot of other people that may indeed be getting, once again, overscreened and re-blocked out and rebooted. And, I do. I just think this whole job market is going to be coming full circle, where it is going to have to be who the heck do in your communities that do what you want to do or do what your kid needs to do to go get your jobs. And that's at every level. Because, you're right. I mean, if you're perfect, you're a Harvard grad, you have a, 4.0 and you have 2 jobs out of school, well, you can get a job anywhere. I mean, that's great. You won't have any problems. AI will find you a job. Everybody will find you a job. But it's the rest of the world that is a little bit gray or a little bit too experienced or not enough or unemployed or, older or whatever, that we're going to have to worry about finding jobs. And I just see, the future of work is going to be different for a lot of us. And, it's how do you show someone, as you said, how do you take my skill set as a recruiter and be like, hey, well, maybe she could do PR, or maybe she could do sales, or maybe she could come over here and transition and help in the HR department, right? So, I think it is transferring skill set, but then again, me, right? So I think that, as you said, it all is going to come right back to relationships. And, I would trust you to come in and do most things, and not a lot of people know people well enough to be able to do that, right? So it's always kind of that surface, I think they do X, Y, Z, but it's building those, drilling deep on relationships and really getting to know what a person does and
How
what they
do
do well.
so
And
how do we know how do we build that relationship, right? Because like if I'm 25 and I work at one of the big companies, and I basically work 8+ hours, go home, have dinner, go sleep, and then work again. And sometimes I go to networking events, but sometimes I'm too tired where I can't. How should I change my life then so that I can build better relationships?
yeah, I think this is a great question. I think there's a couple of ways. Number one is in-house. You really have to find out your boss. You have to find out, who you should be shadowing, who you should be mentoring, who you should be partnering with, who do they think is a superstar. So you grab onto your boss one day, you take them out to lunch, and you just basically, who are your top 3 people that, I really want to get ahead and talk about your goals and dreams, and, and start to follow them and figure out why they're so wonderful, and then become one of those people that then becomes invaluable, irreplaceable. Your boss, the better they look, the better you look. So you need to make your boss look good, and you need to, have that kind of hierarchy where, not only he thinks you're great now, but then who are his 3 top peers and who are his bosses, and you kind of have to really get in there and make yourself, irreplaceable, and know and hang out with the best of the best. You're not hanging out with the, people that, are getting on reports, and the people that are not, and then they're being negative, and the people that are getting reviewed. You don't hang out with them. And it's really important to kind of, decipher who are the top people in a company and make sure that you hang out with the proper people. Then on the outside, as far as a career, if you've chosen, say, human resources, or you've chosen technology, or whatever that career is, you really need to figure out, what are the best companies that are doing what you're doing, and really know, where those people are. Once again, the job fairs, the trade shows, the conferences, go to as many as you can. And I do think, conferences, that's a great time to get to know someone and partner with someone, and not just sit there and just listen and then, go on your cell phone. It's really to take that time to get to know people and to build that relationship. And then, call them out to happy hour, build that relationship, remember to invite them somewhere, remember that you're going somewhere, and really try to go out there and really build those relationships. because that's how you do it. I mean, you can't, constantly, you're right. If you're just going, and you're putting in the minimal amount of hours, or you're putting in a ton of hours and you're not getting outside the box, you're never going to have, these people that you may have to work with in the future. A company may acquire you in the future. You want to have these contacts in advance. I always say, know 20 people who can hire you today. And, whether that's, even if it's not getting hired, if it's business development. If you're a startup, who are 20 different companies you want your products in? And how are you getting to those people? I mean, people aren't going to buy from a cold call. People aren't going to fund you if they don't know you. It's all through relationships. And if you eventually want to go through different levels of funding, you need to have those relationships in advance. Nobody's going to do it from a cold call. They don't know you from Adam. They don't have to. And, it is. I think everything's coming back full cycle, where it used to be, here's my network, here we are. I, like you, as far as I like to have, top 10 percenters. I like to hang out with the best of the best. I like to know where those people are, and I like to connect everyone. I'm a pretty good connector. I love to do that. That's my skill set. So, maybe you find some connectors too that can help you, if you need 10 contacts, now maybe you don't have them, but maybe I have them. So, get to know some people who are connected, get to know people who are connectors. And once again, build a relationship with them. So it's not just you call me, every 5 years and say, hey, Lynn, where's this person? Not very helpful. And, it's like, okay, great. Instead you might be like, hey, here's some job openings. Here's some things you can help work on. Here's somebody I thought you might use. Right, exactly. Build a relationship. And then when you go and ask me for something, I'm going to give it to you. And be like, here you go. Right? So it's, I think that we're all finding it out that it's a lot different world. I think we're all different ages, and we're all struggling, and we all are going to need things. And there's only so much information on the web, right? It's all just information. And information is just information. Information is power, but it's not relationships. So I think that's a big difference.
So information is power, but not relationships.
What do you think about that? I mean, you can grab all the information you want off the web, right? I mean, we have more access to everything than we never had, right? I mean, you and I didn't have that, right? Most people didn't have that stuff growing up. There's tons of info. You can get access to anybody, but not everybody's going to call you back at a cold call.
And then there's also attitude and character, and how you use that information, and how you're building that relationship, right? So if you're building a relationship and you have that attitude and mentality, that you're entitled, then why would the other person help you? And if you're using another person and not giving and taking, why would that person continue to help you? And if you make a promise and you don't fulfill that, how should that person help you again? And
Right.
what does it mean? Do people really talk to each other? And if you are going to mistreat someone, is that building a relationship? And how would that impact you in the long run? I mean, what is those ramifications, right? So what does it really mean to build a relationship? I mean, I think a lot of people, if you're, media, a lawyer, photographer, people ask you for help a lot, right? And they don't want to pay you. Even you with your connections, right? So, like
they always want it for free, right?
yeah, exactly. But if you're doing those things for a living, should that person get compensated for that? And how do you draw the line and build boundaries? So I think the expectation and boundary building is very important because because that's part of that relationship, right? So just really finding out, hey, I wanted to build a relationship with you. I mean, don't say it like that, but how would that work? And then just kind of like set expectations so that if you're going to make a promise, you're going to fulfill that. You're grateful when someone helps you, so, it doesn't feel that use or entitlement, right? And I think drawing those boundaries and lines are super important nowadays when it's so
Oh, I
easy
agree.
to unblock, defriend. I think even email, there's like just blocking everywhere, right? So I think people grow up very differently. They learn from their family units, and it's different from family to family. And so when one person gives too much, the other person, might not see that as giving. Um, it might be seen as intrusion. When one or stalking, right? If someone doesn't give like any, it might just be very aloof. Someone might misread it as, oh, they don't care. So I think the with relationship, I think communication is very important because fundamentally is really how we understand from one another and what we think and believe. What how we're setting those boundaries and expectation and how those are communicated so that the relationship is not hurt.
Totally understand. I mean, that's what they say about the love languages, right? Everybody
Oh
gives
yeah.
and receives differently, and really, that's what you're talking about. I mean, it's true. I mean, my email communication, I'm just very curt and standard, and whatever. But sometimes people take that as rude. I'm not. I'm just fast,
Yeah.
But you're correct in that some people take it totally the wrong way, and I have to come out and say, no, this is how
Yeah, because you
I'm very
can't.
short.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't hear tone, right, on written
Mhm.
messages. And if you're really busy, like you and I, like I'm
Yeah.
really direct as well. So I'll, shoot an email and then I'll go and do whatever I need to do, and if I write like a couple paragraph, it'll take me a couple hours to do that. And I may not respond right away. It's not because I
Right.
don't care. It's just because I need to allocate time to do that.
Right. And some people, that's their full communication, and they always put, the cheers at the end, and how are you, and all the the thoughtfulness, and they
Yeah.
come out, and it's so lovely to read, mind you. It's much
It's
much
awesome.
better to read that, but exactly. And it is friendlier, and you don't get upset. But it is. It's a different thought process. You're correct. It's a different personality type. It's yeah. So you're right. Even in just email communication, how are you either challenging your relationships or building relationships? Exactly. I tend to warn everyone. My text is very bad. You tend to warn people about my communication style. It's very short. So, but no, it's always an interesting adventure building relationships. I'm thrilled that we've had this conversation because it is important that people understand. And sometimes we all get hurt and we take things the wrong way. We've all been in relationships where we totally misread things too, right? So
Yeah.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think
it's
it,
all
yeah, I think I'm guilty as well, like all the time, right? Because how many relationships have I like ruined or burned? Probably a lot, and a lot of them is just like miscommunication, right?
right. Right. Yep. And it is. And right now I think I'm old enough that I pick up the phone. As soon as someone says something that I see as being misconstrued, I don't email back. I pick up the phone. And I think that that's really, worked for me. It's like, let me tell you what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going to go there.
even this morning, I just received like a text that says, "Oh, we've been going back and forth, but I'm not confrontational, so I haven't responded to you." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's okay." And I think in the future, if there's an issue that we should just talk.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it is just like very, for me it's just like a very small, business related stuff, regarding like an item on something. And I think if we spoken, I think it would have just, talked through it and then all would have been fine, right?
Yeah,
And sometimes if you go back and forth, it just escalates it. And people get
it does.
mad. And it just doesn't have to be that way. And then sometimes because of ego and whatnot, people just refuse to be on the phone and they have to one up each other, they have to know better, they think they're right and oh my god, just like it becomes a power play. And sometimes that doesn't need to be.
Yes, I had that recently. I had someone who told me that they were an executive and I was not an executive. And when I get to be an executive, I was like, whoa. I handle CEOs for a living and no one's ever come at me that way. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, there are power plays, absolutely. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
everybody does what they do.
sometimes you talk to it, and sometimes you can't, right? I mean, sometimes as a woman, I mean, I just don't want it to discredit issues that women, and I guess professionals of color, and also, a lot of older, founders and professionals face. Because I think it's important to really realize that sometimes we have biases and they're there, um, you know, and if it's not a bias, then we realize that hey, of course you're a professional. You've been doing this, for a long time, right? Because like I'm a lawyer, right? And I remember that if you're like an Asian female and you're a lawyer, when you go to court, people think that you're not a professional. And sometimes when I go to conferences, I always have to show my credential. Oh, who do you work for? I'm like, oh, I work for myself, and here's my credentials. And you have to always prove yourself because you do not look like a professional. Or what a
Gotcha.
professional should look like. Which is usually white male, right? Um, and between a certain
I hope
age.
not.
So you know what I mean, like, and you have to realize that those biases are out there, and yet when we talk between people, even between our friends, between professionals, the people we work with, we need to really honor the people and what they do and their past, because I think it's important. Um, because I think each person has experiences that and insights that you might not know, that could help you, either grow as a person or, to grow as a company, or to help your job better.
Absolutely. I think everybody brings, background skills, personalities, exactly, things that are great. And, it's called managing their strengths, right? So
Yeah.
if you can manage everybody's strengths and then stop worrying about everybody's flaws because everybody has them, then it would be a better place, right? Exactly. I've gone head to head with some bosses and some managers with strong-willed female. Not everybody's appreciated that, right? But the ones that did manage me well, got a lot of results, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it is. We get that. We get that.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, because you
okay,
don't want everyone to tell you yes.
right?
Because you won't
That would be
change and
bad.
grow as a person, and your company won't grow as well, right? Or your job won't grow as well. I mean, if someone says no, how about this? I think if we do this, that may be better. I think that's, good as well. And sometimes you may not like people telling you no and give you a different perspective. But I think, if you have that kind of growth mindset and really appreciate people telling you no and a different way of doing things, sometimes it really helps because, that way of doing things might, basically save the company a lot of time and become more
Definitely.
efficient. Yeah.
And they say you have to fail, right? So you go forward, and that's really what you do, right? And that's what we're all doing. We're all, we've done none of this before. We're trying, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
we
and
all have
and
to learn.
and the one thing I really learned is I think if you ever built a company before, it supposedly is just really hard, and you manage so many aspects of the company that you might succeed in one thing and you might fail in like another. So it's really like it's people always complain when you're an employee or a consultant, about a CEO or a VP or something, but their job is hard, and, they spent usually weekends and nights working on it. So, I think the attitude of going in somewhere and just really helping versus going somewhere and criticizing the entire company, I think, that's just sometimes a little bit too much. I'm not saying that feedback is not important if, in the bigger picture, they are doing something that, for example, is illegal or, is a violation of something.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot
Feedback.
of balancing.
Yes. Feedback is a gift, as they say, right? It's how we take it, right?
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness. Well, it's been
Wow.
a lot of fun. I've enjoyed this. This is wonderful. I'm glad you have these sessions. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
this is fun, isn't it?
It
um,
is fun. I mean, go ahead.
I wanted to just really, you know, because I have nieces and nephews, and they're quite young. They're like 15 or 16. And that generation when they grow up, I think their workforce and job hunt is completely different. So I want to ask you what your prediction of that future would be like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do. I have teenagers, right? So I
Yeah.
have one that's 18 and one that's 21. So they are, in a totally different job market, totally different how they multitask and what they do and what they're able to do. I mean, they have their radios on or radios. Who would listen to radio? They listen to music. They have their computer. They have their homework. They have everything together at the same time. Um, I just think that generation's going to be able to do a lot more than we've ever done. They'll probably end up launching three businesses at the same time we could launch one. I just think it's just going to be amazing what they can do. I think that it's going to be very streamlined. I think that you're going to have experts in every field because this AI is going to say, okay, these are the experts in building, these are the experts in real estate, these are the experts in what I just think it's going to be so streamlined that they're going to have defined career paths. I mean, they'll already be picking up talents and skills that they have, and then be steered into those. I think it's going to be very interesting. If they're music, they're going to go towards music. If they're going to go, real estate, they go towards real estate. Whatever it is, I think it's just going to be interesting how their skills are mapped and their strengths are managed, and I think it's going to be wild to watch. What's going to happen. But it's going to be different than where we are. I don't think there's going to be as much freedom to choose, what you wanted to do when you wanted to grow up and all of that. I think it's going to be much more defined. Um, I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Awesome.
What are your thoughts?
Um, I think they just have to be specialized and at the same time know a bit of everything at the same time. I think we're moving into a gig economy, right? They can be anywhere and work anywhere, hopefully. I think I did that before. I mean, I used to work at Cisco like in my 20s, and we have a culture where we can work from home. But when you're so young and you work from home, you don't really have the interaction of coworkers,
Right.
so it's just a little bit different, right? And I think having people to have lunch with and to chat, is kind of important. um,
Right.
Especially when you're really young and you're just learning, the culture and the work environment. So, that against a gig economy where you're working for 10 companies doing specialized things and different things, I think it's becoming, more, might be more prevalent later on. And then, so I think it's really important that the later generations synthesize knowledge, not just to know them. Of course, you can go to Google and find out whatever you want, but I think that critical thinking skills, the ability to synthesize and put facts together and to analyze and understand things and not memorizing it, and not looking for things. I think that's going to become very important because you need to problem solve. And a lot of times when you are doing something, it's not going to be in a blog article. Because I think as technology advances, it's the speed to execute something and build something to change and be part of that change is a shorter period of time. So you really have to use your mind, like as much as possible. I think knowledge by itself is power, but it's also dead. If you don't use it, you can't analyze it, and you can't build on top of it, right? So I think I'm hoping that later generation is going to be able to do that. I mean, I think we have AI. We have autonomous car, but it's so slow still. We still have. I mean, there's still issues with theories of the mind where if we could trick it, and it could cause deaths, right? I think another item with that is that the technology, when we messed up, has a bigger impact on society today than ever. If different cars explode, or they go off the road, driving Highway 1 or 17, if you use self-driving cars, like who knows, right? But if we
Right.
rely on that, it costs lives, and I think it's just more important that we're able to really, synthesize and use technology and solve some of these biggest issues, so that we can mitigate some of the risks as well as advancing and innovating technology, right? And that goes back to job hunt. Technology is really blocking people from getting a job that might be the right fit. At the same time, it's connecting people and making the right fit. So it's almost a paradox, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is. It is. It's a good thing to be in, though. So it's good we're still in it. That's all good. We still have to think through all these things, so that's good. But I don't know, but yeah, it's a very interesting time. With all the information that's out there and the revolution that's going on currently in all fields, and it is going to be interesting where it all shakes out. I mean, it's something that's never been done before, right? So
Yeah.
we're all we're all in it
Yeah.
faster than anywhere. So
And before we go, because we have 1 minute, I wanted to ask you what would be one advice that you wanted to provide to the community about job hunting?
I think just getting back to the fact that you really need to understand that applying online is only one piece of your job search strategy, and then really relationship mapping yourself to 25 people that could possibly hire you, and how do you get to them. And if people are more interested, I do consulting on that, and I have a practice in doing that. So you can always reach out to me as well. But I think that is really the key. Is you really have to know people, and there's got to be multifacets to your job search, not just applying online.
And
Is
then
that
what
it?
is your website?
So basically, the easiest way to get a hold of me is through LinkedIn. I have multiple websites, but LinkedIn's usually the quickest way in. So it's Lynn, Lynn, Radice, Radice. And then you could just ping me on LinkedIn, and I could track you back down. No worries. And I have lots of books and things like that.
All right.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Alrighty. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.